Hey y'all, this is Sarah. I am bringing you a chevron pattern tutorial today. Um, Hopefully we can get all the way through, beginning to end, all the way to the frame. I took a few shortcuts, but I did want to start with the first thing, which is I cut 4 strips down at 5 by 30 inches. And I'm going to show you how we're going to cut those down. So I'm not sure if I can get this in for you to see these measurements. So at the top of your boards, you need to mark out at 2 7/8, 8 5/8, 14 3/8, and 20 1/8. And I'm sorry, the last one on the top is 25 7/8. Now the bottom, you're going to mark at 5 3/4, 11 1/2, 17 1/4, and 23. And I'm going to try to get a little closer to that for a second so that you guys can get those measurements. Okay, so let me go back out. I've cut down 3 of these already. This is my 4th one. I didn't want to spend the entire time cutting. So I'm going to take a few shortcuts in this. So the reason we did it this way is we're going to go from this 2 7/8 down to this very first corner. And you're going to go from this 8 5/8 down to the 5 3/4. This is going to give us a 60-degree angle on these. And it's going to make a diamond pattern. And you'll get 4 of these diamonds out of the length of your board. There'll be some scraps at the end. You guys know how I feel about my scraps. I wanted to show you something cute with these scraps, by the way, on this particular one. Some of our scraps we may end up using as fillers, but this particular one, you get a scrap at the end that looks like this. And it turns into a little house shape if you put 2 of them together. I've got to cut these down. They're kind of beat at the ends, but I just wanted to show that it gives like a cute little house shape when you're done with them. Now, if you wanted to go ahead and paint your entire board, instead of having to do what I'm about to do and then do your cuts, that works too. I just wasn't going to be able to get the measurements written on there if I painted this one first. So we're going to paint these. And we ultimately, I think there will be 1 left over, but we'll need a few to do the edges. So I've done this. I'm going to paint these, but I wanted to show you the other thing that I cut down. I went ahead and cut 1 1/2 inch strips. This set is at 20 inches long with a 45-degree miter cut at the end. This set is 15 inches long and also with the mitered cut at the end. So this is going to be my frame at the end, and this is just the 1 1/2 inch pieces that I've discussed that I end up cutting off most of my boards. So I just wanted to let you know while you're doing your cuts that you could go ahead and get those cut down. I'll try to get these arranged where I can stab them real quick. I'm not going real crazy with these. Just a little something. I hope you guys see this because you'll be seeing this part again before long. So a few little stabs. I'm not putting knot holes in these. I'm going to go ahead and do my sides. And the only paint that I'm using for this project to keep it simple is the Waverly Wax in the color Antique. We're going to keep this one really simple. You can always do one of the more complex wood tones. It's just, if you notice, if I'm trying to get an entire project, I'll stick with something pretty simple. Okay, so let me get these the right direction because I've written on one side. And I've pre-done several of my little diamonds already. I went ahead and pre-painted them so that they would be dry pretty quickly. Mine are in several different shades of this. So I've gone real light, like how you see this one. I've gone darker. So they all have a little subtle difference when we get ready to put our pattern together. It'll make it a little more striking to look at. So at this point, I just rubbed a little bit of this on. There's no particular look to this at the moment. I went from longest point to longest point as my grain area. And I felt like that made it pretty easy to keep consistent. So as you can see, I'm going to go in on this. I'm going to do another layer over this of some really heavy graining. And I want to show you something cool. And this is not necessary. It's just I like to play. So this one's got some paint on it that's wet. I'm going to put these together and slide them up a little. Can you see this interesting little pattern that goes on here? I found that to be very similar to some of the patterns you see on wood. I'm not going to leave it in this one. I just wanted to kind of show that. You could do it with your strips too. I just thought it was a neat result. And while I had these painted up, I wanted to show you that. This helps keep me from wasting paint, by the way. And from getting too much paint on one project. Or one piece. Alright now. Let's not get too frisky. See, I just kind of wanted to show that. I thought it was a really cool little result. Definitely going to be playing with that a little more on some long strips. So everything else I've gotten painted up. By the time I start laying things out, that'll give these a chance to dry. And there we go. I'm pretty good with these colors. I'm going to put these off to the side. I've got a fingerprint on this one, so let me clean that off. So I'm going to put these away. That's all the painting I'm going to be doing. I kept it real simple on this. The more intricate paint schemes are definitely worth looking into to see if maybe it's something you want to try with this pattern. I just didn't want to go too far into the painting part on this. Okay, so the next thing I did is I cut down a black piece of foam core. This is at 15 by 20. So this is taking a full sheet and cutting it in half. I'm just going to go ahead and do my sides here before I get my paint sealed off and put up. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I'm just taking a little bit of this same Waverly Wax in Antique. And I'm running it down this white foam side. So that when we get ready to stack all this together, we have a nice, clean, finished edge. Part of why I use the black is that you don't see through it, and then you have a nice, clean backing. So be sure to check, see if you want it a little over crazy with the paint. Try to get your fingerprints off. I'm going to pull this label off real quick. And there we go. Get my sponges here. Now that I'm done painting, I'm going to cover this paint mess up here. So I want to know my middle points on this. I know that this is 20 inches wide. So I know my halfway point is 10. So I'm going to go. Y'all, I'm struggling to see this pencil mark on this black. So really I just need this line, but I went ahead and put both so I could kind of keep an eyeball on where I was lining my pattern up. Those are not my dries. Let me go with my dries first. So I've got all these guys finished out and dried. And I'm going to start with here in the middle. And I'm getting it lined straight up down through here. Going to do the same thing here. And then I'll do the same thing up here. Whoop, let's try not to slide everywhere. This is why I use washi tape to kind of hold my patterns in place. They will slide everywhere. So I like the little pattern on this one. I'm going to put it a little. And I'm just moving my colors around so that it has some visual interest. Let's put that there. Okay, let me grab. Oh, nope, you gotta stay. So you can kind of see where this is going. And I'm just going to look and see if I kind of like the design. I do. I feel pretty good with this design. So I'm going to go ahead. And if you notice, when I painted these, all of my edges, I went ahead and did. That way, no matter what ended up on the sides, it was nice and prepped. I'm going to pull the hot glue gun out. We're going to glue these directly to this black foam core. I'm going to go from tip to tip to tip on this. Those are definitely the spots we want to get adhered down. And I'm going to line it straight up right here along this center line. And you want to make sure that you put pressure all the way on those. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing with each one. And I'm putting maybe a little teeny tiny kind of gap in between. So you can go up and down, you can go sideways, whichever way you want to work at your pattern here once you've got it figured out. I'm just going to get them all worked around on the bottom. And I'm going to do down my edges next, because I want to make sure that this part lines up, so I don't want to end up making too much gap doing this and it not ending up being able to make it flush on this side and on the other side. So I'm going to do my edge pieces first. Okay. I'm going to do the other side the same way. That way I know these areas are really flush. The better you can get your edge pieces aligned with your edge when you glue all this together, the better this side of the structure looks. So one of my pieces escaped. I'm going to catch this one. When you're all done, you'll end up with a spare. I went ahead and cut mine because I know I'll end up using it for something else. While I was doing all the work, I went ahead and painted it too. Okay. I feel like I've got my sides really nice. That makes my center portion fit really tight here and a little less tight here. And if you don't like how they line up, try flipping them around. Okay, so that's a little better. And these fit beautifully like a little puzzle. Last one. And if you notice by me going corner to corner on this, on how or tip to tip when I did my grain, it kind of makes your grain keep a nice flow. You could have done them all entirely different, but I was worried that that would make an already busy pattern a little too busy. Okay, so everything is in place. You can see this is what my back looks like. If you wanted to go larger, you could always be sure to keep your edges because they'll work as fill-ins here. If you wanted to go bigger, this was just the size that I chose to do this with. Excuse me. So just always keep in mind, especially when you're cutting the edges down on this, I feel like it's so much easier than to measure each individual piece to just cut it at the end like this. And I'm going to start well above here. These get a little tougher to cut when you're doing this simply for the fact that you're cutting through hot glue, things like that. So I'm going to get it flush. And hopefully I went all the way through that. Yep. We're going to do the very same thing on this side. I'm going to pull this a little closer to me so I can see what I'm doing. This one definitely you want to start well before it, because you certainly need pressure. Okay, so now you're going to see the sides are all even. And I'm going to do, this is not necessary. You certainly could hide this fairly easily. But I'm going to try to match this up. Just because I don't want that little space there. And all of these are at 90 degrees, and that is not a 90-degree angle. So this one will definitely work right here. So I'm only doing this part. Your frame's going to hide it. However, from the side, I would know that that was under there. So I'm just going to cut this little section off. And I have one of these. It's got a little damage on it. And I want it to fit nicely in there. You can see they don't always get cut just right. I did not notice that until after the fact. We're just going to slide this little piece in place. Like I said, your frame would totally cover this. I just would know it was there and it would drive me crazy. So there we go. That way from the side, I get a more cleaned up view. Just going to bring my Waverly wax in again. You know what, guys? I do not like getting wax on this. I'll go through with these edges. And it's okay if you get some of the paint right here. You can clean that off. Your frame is going to cover that. If you were not going to frame this, like if you just wanted the piece to look like this, just kind of keep that up as you go. And try not to make an extra mess as you go. That helps too. See, those little pieces really weren't much, but it keeps there from being a gap. Okay, all the edges look really nice. Make sure I get any excess paint off. Even if you have a little overage here, if you're framing this, it's not going to show. If you wanted to leave this piece just like this, you'd be good. So I've cut my strips down. I've painted them up to save me time. If you guys want to, be sure to check out the finishing video I did that just walks through how to finish off the backs of these if you're using something other than the black foam core. It gives you tips on making sure your edges look nice. It's just worth checking out a little. It also helps you figure out how to get your frame cut down in a nice miter. This section is 20 inches, so from point to point here, this is a 20-inch strip. Same for this one. I love doing this because if your edges are not perfect and they're not straight, this allows you to hide quite a bit of that. So there we go. It's all sized just right. So I'm going to make sure these corners, they definitely need to be adhered down as properly as you can. This is usually where you get the most abuse. I do try to get really close along the edges. And then everything else is just on my little piece here. So a little trick is get something flat. You could take your ruler. And then you know that you've got this nice and flush. So that's going to give you an almost solid looking edge. I'm going to go around here. Going to do the same thing to this edge. So I'm going to glue my little strip down. I want to make sure that I've got some here in the corners. A little directly along this edge. And that's pretty flush. And these last two, I'm going to try to work these together. That way, if you're slightly off anywhere, you've got a little wiggle room. It allows for you a little adjustment. right about in this process. So I look like I'm pretty good. I'm gonna load my gun here. Get down to this corner. Hit that edge. Oh, no. I almost had that slid out of place. And here we go, last piece. Bump that there. And there you go. You have got a few spots that I feel like I might like to put a little paint. I have a little heavier here on the edge. And let's see. This side could use a little extra too. That foam definitely, the black takes it slightly differently than the white. I don't know why. You would think the center of the foam core is pretty much the same, but it definitely takes it slightly different. You can see right there. So sometimes you have to go over it more than once, because you can see it's quite a bit lighter. But here you go. It's a completely finished piece, and I'm sure I'll play with this idea a little more. This one I'm definitely looking forward to playing with, although I'm not hating that. And the cool thing about this piece is either which direction you turn it, you could have easily gone in with some color. I just wanted to keep this really simple. I love playing with these patterns.